So let's talk about events and event sources in a microservices or even a monolith kind of a domain. When we develop backend especially, we deal with events captured through various event sources, right? So what is an event source? An event source could be any particular mechanism through which we trigger our business logic, something to do. There is an event which happened, let me now act upon it. Okay, now there are two kinds of event sources. One which requires you to also send a response back, for example REST API, gRPC, GraphQL. Okay, if you expose your function through that event source, you will also be sending some response back to the caller, to the client. Then the second kind of event source is where you just consume the event. In a way, you simply act upon it, you do something about it, but you are not returning any response. In fact, the caller doesn't even know who you are, where you are, nor even you know the caller. Nobody knows each other. We just know that somebody has sent me this particular somebody sorry we just know that somebody has just published this particular event. Now I'm listening on it, and there could be any other listeners. I don't even know who else is listening on it. Okay, that's the second kind. Those are called asynchronous event sources, and they are, for example, a message bus like Kafka, or they could be even WebSocket. It could even be a cron job running on your machine. So it could be any kind of an event source, even a Salesforce kind of an event. If you're listening on a Salesforce data stream for mutations, it could be any other such kind of source. Okay, so two kinds of event sources, sync and async. Now when we deal with events, when we capture events from event sources, there are some things which are common, right? Every event has an input that we get, which has a data in a certain shape. We expect data as event handler in to have data in a certain shape, and we also expect certain authentication, and authorization, that whosoever has called the event, in case of sync events, is this person authorized to execute this. For that, we authenticate the person and then see whether they are authorized or not. Okay, after that we validate the input, that the input I have received from this event, is it in correct shape or not as expected by our API contract, okay, which is defined by my API schema. Once validation passes, we call the event handler. And event handler is a function which runs the business logic for that event. Okay, whatever is to be done, save something in a database, retrieve from a database, make an API call, join the responses, do transformation, computation, and return. When the function returns the response, then the event source job is to serialize this response and send it back to the client. Okay, there is so much that happens, and even in the whole flow we attach middleware also. When receiving an input, you may want to do any action on the input, transform the input, check the input, whatever. And even when returning the response, you may want to add some generic middleware to do some stuff on top of the response being sent. All right, so this is what happens in the whole flow of events coming through various event sources and event handlers being called. Okay, and the response being sent in case of sync events.